Hi, my name is Paula and I'm a new mom. Welcome to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club, about how we really dealt and truly felt about everything motherhood. No BS, no judgment, and no advice, from us at least. Welcome to the club. This is a story of how we decided to exclusively breastfeed, how long we did it for, and the challenges and connections that we'll never forget. So breastfeeding, what a loaded topic. I remember being pregnant with Maya and just thinking I'm going to breastfeed because breast is best and that's what I was taught. And, you know, she's just going to get plopped on my boob and she's going to know what to do and I just follow her lead. I thought she would know what to do and that wasn't the case right away. No class in the world or no breastfeeding, video or anything could have prepared me for actually doing it myself when Maya was born and I had to take her home. So I did know, the skills and, the mouth has to be open and all that jazz that they teach you. But when you physically are alone and you have to do it, with your baby there, it's a whole different story. I can't say that I had many challenges, but, there were a few times where, she wasn't latching on properly and she was feeding, too often or anyway, but all in all, it was a pretty easygoing experience. And then second, with Maddie, my second, I knew what to do and it was okay. So today I'm joined by Catherine, who's a mom of two, whose breastfeeding journey wasn't as clear cut as mine. So let's dig into your breastfeeding stories and, what happened and, and tell us, how that made you feel and just let's start with your breastfeeding journey and what you were taught.
So I had breastfeeding issues like within 5 minutes of my firstborn being born.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to give birth with my first at a hospital that was very breastfeeding driven.
Yeah.
Here in Montreal. And so I'm lucky that I had the support there. But I think from the get-go, I could feel that something was off. And I remember them discharging me and baby was gaining a good enough weight, I think, more weight than the expected curve. So they're like, everything's fine. The mechanics are working. It's working for you. And then I'm like, sure, because I'm doing it. I'm putting in the work, but it doesn't feel right. Like this is, they say you learn in those classes you take when you're pregnant, like, well, it's not supposed to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like it just wasn't smooth sailing. Like it was very forceful. I remember like it felt like almost like math geometry, like how I had to line her up and everything, like this multi-step process.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, when they're newborns, it's not as fluid as like when they're older and you just put them on. It just felt so calculated. And so I was having a lot of pain, like, toe curling, almost like, screaming pain. I was blistering.
At the hospital or when you get home?
At the hospital, and they were just like, well, that's normal. You've got these, I always say that, and this is, what happened with the first. It's like always breaking into a shoe, right? When you break into a shoe and you haven't worn it in like 3 seasons, you might blister it first. And so that's what they were kind of explaining to me that, well, this is new for you. It's new for you and baby. It's new for your breasts. And so we're kind of like wearing into your nipples and it takes adjustment and then it'll go away. And her weight gain is, like excellent. So there's no problem here. And I didn't feel ready to leave at all. I mean, I was a first time mom then, right? Everything was so new to me and you just want to get it right. And you want to be around support and you're scared, like you touched on that, to go back home into the oblivion with no one and you've got to figure this out. And we got back home and there is that when they're newborns, they lose their weight a bit to then regain it. But things were still going well there, but it just kind of spiraled and unraveled and the pain was getting worse. And I was just like, I would dread, if I just go back to thinking of like those newborn days with both or the first or the second, like I would dread each feed. I would,
and just to like let everyone you're feeding at this point every 2 hours.
So I was just going to say, and you're feeding, or it's feed on demand every 2 hours or whenever they wake. It's the first thing you do.
Yeah.
And I would just sometimes, granted I had winter babies and it was always really dark. And I think like in hindsight, that didn't help. And you're inside the whole time. And, let's talk about the first one being a COVID baby. Like you're having your first, you're alone. you don't have the resources, the parental support, the family support that I felt or had with my second.
Mhm.
And I would just dread every time I'd put her on, whether it was to like get it right or the pain, the toe curling. Like I'd always say, like I felt like the whole block hurt me. The tears, um, but also the whole like, and what would ensue was that she would often, I find, come off. And now this is getting to more of like why I had such difficulty and what we learned. We finally took a second child to learn about like the issue I had
Right.
in the mechanics, but they would always plop off, both of them. And so it was constantly me being like, "What's going wrong? Like, put her back." And like, you can't, we learned, or I would learn from those classes, like, don't force baby back on. Never force their head.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was just this whole emotional, the sleep deprivation, the fatigue, the newness, the waking up every 2 hours, the pain. Like when you're tired, pain does not help. Like
Yeah.
everything gets exacerbated.
Yeah.
Um,
And so did you kind of like was what they told you at the hospital, it's normal, it's supposed to hurt a little bit, like, did that ever change with your first? Like, was there a certain point where you're like, "Hey, this is too much, this is not normal, like, I have to do something?" Or did you
yeah,
just go
well, I
through
was
it?
just like, no, this is not normal. And then you reach out to the professionals because you need help.
Mhm,
Also, this is COVID. Like,
mhm.
I didn't have the grandmothers there to help me, or so like you reach out to the pediatrician, and it's always like they're looking at the curve and the weight gain, and everything's fine. They want you to do better. They want it to be okay for you.
Right.
But I think it was we were always on this kind of like breaking point of like, well, in, the weight gain was always hard. So it's like, well, do you want to put yourself through this? Or do you wanna just, like, pump and give the bottle?
Right.
But, if you wanna find somebody to help you with the whole mechanics, you need to reach out to a lactation consultant.
Mhm.
And, I was lucky enough during COVID to find one that came to the house, but, I don't wanna be discouraging here. For me, and I'm jumping ahead here, but for both kids, that never really, like, helped it.
So, okay. So, I remember when Maya, um she she breastfed fine at the beginning, okay? And then all of a sudden, I
Me
forget
too.
when, but there was like a certain period, maybe 2
3
months,
weeks.
3 weeks in,
That's where.
she started like unlatching, latching, unlatching,
Mhm.
like, and I was like, what is going on? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And I remember and it was COVID, and it was the only resource I had was my CLSC nurse. So I called her and she came here to show
Yeah,
me the
for sure.
mechanics. And I don't know, I guess it's the luck of the draw of who you get, but she explained to me exactly how to put my boob in her mouth, and that changed everything for me. Like, I had, like, a
Yeah,
click
for sure.
in my brain, and that helped. So I guess again, it could be the luck of the draw of who you get, how it's explained to you, but
No, I think it's more, linked to, like, I was saying the issue or the condition that I have with
so it wasn't a
breastfeeding.
mechanical
No,
thing.
because I saw, the CLSC nurse who, these nurses are, while they're not, some are lactation consultants, some are not, but while they're
Yeah.
still trained in this field.
Mhm.
And I saw a lactation consultant who came to see me once or twice, showing me mechanics, but the positioning that never worked for me. And so with my second, for the first one, I wanted to get into to a lactation clinic at a hospital
Mhm.
here in Montreal, and I guess I just couldn't get in because it was COVID and it was so backlogged, right? People needed support. Nobody could come. A lot of people couldn't come to the house, so this
Mhm.
clinic was backlogged. Luckily enough, with the second I got in, and I was seen by family doctors who are also lactation consultants. So you've got the mix of like a world of like the lactation consultants with like medicine,
Mhm.
family medicine,
Mhm.
and they finally put the nail on it that I had a condition or an issue called overactive letdown.
Okay.
And so this explains why the whole positioning, I mean, yes, it did help, but it never resolved the issue. I never just, put baby on.
Yeah.
And I should preface that, now my youngest, the baby is 10 months. Like my issue always gets resolved around between 3 and 4 months.
Okay.
When basically, from what I've been told, is that your milk supply kind of regulates hormonally for the rest of the year.
Okay.
And so, for the first 3 months, and we were talking about the first 3 weeks with my second, I remember like being at the hospital and everything was going fine. I'm like, oh, like now
Perfect.
I know what I'm doing because like I've done this before. I'm a second time mom. Like,
Mhm.
and like I felt like at the time with the first, I could be a lactation consultant because I had seen it all. But I remember at the 3-week mark too, and I think that if I recollect properly, that's when your your milk comes in. And so like there's a lot of milk and hormonally a lot of stuff that's coming through for the baby, and the newborn's mouth is not like big enough, the muscles in the mouth to take that flow. It's like a flow issue. Everything went to hell at that point. So, but yeah, at the 3-4 month mark with overactive letdown for me, it usually resolves itself.
And do you think that, we were talking about the breastfeeding courses and, I only remember that there was one breastfeeding course that I got at the CLSC when
Yeah.
when I was pregnant. But do you think that had you gotten more information, for example, should you choose to breastfeed, um, you know, these are the possible things that could happen. Overactive letdown, mastitis, clot,
Low
you know what I mean?
supply.
Low supply.
So many
Like,
people have the
do you
low supply
think
issue.
that, you know, had you known more information about breastfeeding, you would have, like, a red flag would have gone in your brain and been like, oh, well, maybe I have this, maybe. Because if you
For
don't know, you don't
sure.
know what to look for.
For sure. And I want to say, just for the viewers, that makes me think of like I talked about, you reach out to the specialists, the professionals, like, pediatrician,
Yeah.
um, the lactation consultants. And then the lactation consultants sent us down the path of like, well, is there a tongue tie? And I want to talk about that issue because I think it's a big thing for mothers, for the newborn mothers
Mhm.
who are in this phase of like, well, baby won't latch.
Yeah.
I've heard it like so many times, and that's why I want to address it. Like, baby won't latch, and they take you down the road of tongue tie, and there could possibly be a tie. I have a friend who has a newborn right now. She just like released the tie.
Yeah.
Many friends. They take you down that route, and then they took us down the route of seeing an osteopath
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like, it would really help baby's body. Baby might be, I'm just like, paraphrasing, but like, tight on the jaw here and
Yeah.
not on this side. And so it
Yeah.
might affect the mechanics of the latch or
Yeah.
the tie. And so we went to go see a pediatric dentist at
Wow.
at the children's hospital.
Mhm.
And, so it's like, as a first time mom having these issues, we're in like, 3 weeks of birth here, like seeing all the appointments, all the specialists we
Mhm.
saw. Um, it's COVID, like going to these appointments alone without my husband. And then you would get like, conflicting opinions. Like, you got to do this, do the exercises, and you got to like, you know, release the tie, or it got to the point where one of them was like, "Well, you lose nothing to just release the tie." And I was like, "No, to me, like
Why would I put my yeah.
that's not like an opinion. Like, well, if you've tried, we're at 3 weeks here, or you've tried so much, maybe this could help."
Yeah.
Um, the one thing I would say is, and I'm very, very happy about it, is you got to stick to your gut
Mhm.
always. Like, you got to always recenter yourself with yourself and your gut and what feels right to you as a mom, a parent, but also as a person. And like, that's always served me.
So what did feel right to you at that moment?
Like, I was like, to me, it's like, no, it's not a tie. It's not these exercises. I think it's just like, and we've talked about this before, like figuring out how to dance together.
Right.
Like, I'm new to this, and it might be whatever like I have or baby has, or it just might be harder on me to just get the mechanics of it,
So
you
once you
know?
found out you had your overactive letdown,
With the
what?
second, yeah.
Oh, okay. With the
We
second.
doubted it with the first, but when we were at this lactation, the medical lactation clinic at the hospital,
Yeah.
and they would just look at it and see baby come off.
Okay. But
Um,
with the first, what was the problem?
it was the same. It's just that during COVID, I didn't get that diagnosis.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is how did you fix it?
It's just time. And
Time.
and what you were getting at with the lactation consultants is helping yourself with the positions to
Okay.
try to get through each feed.
Okay.
Because what I'm saying is that it's not that it didn't help, it just didn't resolve itself. It's not
Mhm.
like your story where you're saying it was like, oh, she showed me one fix and like,
Yeah.
poof, it went away.
Yeah.
That never happened for me. It's what happens to me is that at the 3-4 month mark, it's poof goes away because hormonally my milk supply
Okay.
kind of adjusts. And I
Mhm.
think also baby's mouth, the muscles, the jaw
Yeah.
gets bigger and can handle the flow.
Yeah.
And so they would just tell me, it's like, can you just stay the course?
Yeah. And I remember before I called the CLSD nurse, I went to YouTube, obviously, because again, COVID, I had nothing else at my disposition.
Mhm.
And I'm watching these videos and they're like informing me, being like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So like lean back so
Yeah.
that your flow, like, gravity will take your flow back and that it'll be easier for the baby. And I'm doing all these positions and watching all these videos. And I'm
And that
just
worked
like,
with Maya right away?
I mean, listen, I think it helped. I don't know if it was, me trying to make myself feel better because I had nothing else to help me. And I'm like, well, this has to work. Or, like you said, it was just time that made it better.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And that that to me is breastfeeding too. If you're willing to stay the course, if you're willing to put in those hours,
Yeah.
because also let's talk about breastfeeding. It's a one-man show.
Yeah.
You can't tag team like bottle feeding.
Yeah.
All on you.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is tied into the sleep. So, granted, I think, hindsight is 20/20 vision. If I look back and feel like, oh, well, if I got more sleep, I could have handled it more. It all gets compounded.
And I think also it's all like how much is the mother willing to tolerate?
For
How
sure.
much, are you willing to persevere? How much, I mean, there's mothers, and we've seen in other podcasts in the combination feeding, for example, like, for Francesca, Tessa was very slow at the breast. She was waking up. It took her an hour and a half to feed, and then she'd have to
Oh,
wake
yeah.
up 30 minutes later. She's like,
I'll
this is
never.
not for me. Thank you,
It's
the
crazy
end.
when you do the reverse engineering math.
Yeah.
It's like, well, so if I calculate all that, when am I sleeping?
Right. Never.
And then I remember feeling this pressure of like, you got a 30-minute window here to get some shut eye. And then you're kind of like, you gotta sleep. And then you get into this anxiety of like, well, if you don't sleep, like you're just
never gonna
doomed. And
sleep.
I felt this doom, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, like you're not sleeping now, you're not sleeping now.
Yeah.
It's insane. Those newborn days,
Yeah.
like it's not for the faint of heart. It's
So-
breastfeeding, as you're getting it.
Yeah. And so clearly so let's talk. So now we talked about your first. Let's talk about your second now, because that was a little bit more difficult, as I remember.
Oh my God. It's
So
just
so overactive letdown, we know what the problem is now.
with the second, yeah.
But
And I thought it could never get as worse. with the
but you
first.
didn't know that, like, so back up. So your first had overactive letdown, your second is born, you start breastfeeding, everything's fine. You're like,
Yeah.
I can do this, copy paste,
Oh my God.
amazing.
We're like,
But
oh,
then
this
what
is going to be
happens?
smooth sailing. And
You
then
take her home.
3 weeks, everything goes to hell.
Again, you're in pain, what?
So I didn't have pain with the second.
Okay.
And I find that really interesting. Like, I'll chalk it up to, I think it's because, like, well, my breasts and my nipples were just accustomed and used to it. And so they had a good bounce back.
Right.
And I didn't have pain. Like,
So what was
I
the
think
problem?
that the problem is it's babies always latching out with overactive letdown.
Oh.
So you just get, and I think you've been there a bit with Maya, you get anxious of like, what's going on? Are they okay? Why won't they drink? They're supposed to be, it's the newborn days. They're supposed to be spending like 40 minutes on the breast.
Right.
I remember like, my husband would be like, stop looking online.
Yeah.
But it says here that they're supposed to
They
spend,
say.
they're supposed to spend like half an hour, 30 minutes. Like
I remember
eats,
that.
she feeds under 10 minutes,
Yeah.
like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then that gets you worried.
Yeah.
Um,
But you didn't know she had overactive letdown at this point.
no.
Okay. So, but it didn't
We
occur to
always-
you, oh, well, it could be because you first had
like
it.
I'm forgetting so much stuff now, but
Okay,
we've
okay.
always looked at like,
Yeah.
like you touched on them. What are they? You can have a low supply.
Yeah.
You can have some women only have one breast working. You can have a tongue tie. You
Yeah.
can have like we went through the gamut of all of it.
Okay.
All of it.
So
But
then-
we always doubted it was overactive letdown. And now I'll get into it for people who might have this.
Yeah.
But one thing with the first that like turned us away from that was that when you have overactive letdown, and this is just one of the criteria, you're supposed to like have baby's supposed to have tons of milk on their face when they latch off.
Oh, okay.
And my daughters were never like,
Because it was like a hose.
it's like being well, no, I mean we laugh, but it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of a curse. Like
Yeah.
it's when you're in those
yeah.
moments, it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
a curse. The difference is with the first, we didn't have an answer. I
Yeah.
think you get relief as a person when you can
Yes.
when you know what's going on, when you can put your finger on it.
Yes.
When you don't, you always wonder, like with the first, I always wondered, was it me all along? Or did I have something? Or was it just like I didn't know what I was doing?
So for
Or
your
I never
second-
got a clinical diagnosis, if you want.
But for your second, did you go seek out a specialist to confirm that it was overactive
Yes, we
letdown?
went to the lactation consultant, the clinic at the hospital.
Okay.
We got a clinical diagnosis
Okay.
from doctors who are also lactation
Okay.
consultants.
And then you said, okay,
And that
not
was
again.
a relief because it's like, okay, well, now we know what we're dealing with. And we also know that this is supposed to regulate hormonally at 3 to 4 months. And so
Okay.
it was more about just staying the course. And I felt way more, obviously, it wasn't less COVID this time and way more supported. That's the difference with my second, was that I had weekly appointments
Okay.
where they'd be looking at how baby was nursing. They'd be looking at the baby. They weigh her to make sure it's like, well, always that weight intake was there. It was just more like the actual, the process between me and baby,
Yeah.
it's funny that we're doing this today. Yesterday I was walking in the park and I saw these 2 girls with newborns and they were on 2 benches facing each other and they were like just having a talk and nursing.
Yeah.
And I found that like perfect the day before being here because it just made me think like me, Catherine, that was never my experience. I never had that in the newborn days. It's like literal just survival mode. as I said, I would dread each feeding, like, crying, how is this going to go? Will they stay on? Will they, properly get their milk? I never had that enjoyable kind of
Experience.
experience. And it's not that the bonding was there, it just wasn't this like easy, flowy, natural.
Yeah.
It was really kind of everything was just like calculated and
But you saw the light at the end of the tunnel. You knew because you've experienced it before that at a certain time it was gonna get
I
better
was
and you were
really
just gonna persevere,
yeah, and I was really hoping that would happen again this time.
and it did.
Yeah, it did, it did. It's just really when you're in, like, week 3, it's really hard to get to month 4.
Yeah.
And, this time we had a toddler in the mix, and that changed the game because it's like, well, it's pretty much insanity. It's insanity, like, and we talked about this in another podcast, but I just felt like it's so time consuming for me. I need to breastfeed, like, alone, in the dark, pure calm, like, for everything to line up and go well,
Mhm.
I can't have, like, a toddler, rolling around. I need to be, like get all my kind of, like, things in order to calm, quiet, dark. Um,
And
yeah.
and you would say so you obviously, decided to breastfeed, that was the path that you chose and that you weren't gonna kinda stray away from.
Yeah.
Um, do you like, in hindsight now when you remember everything that you went through and, like, the tears and the lack of sleep and the difficulties, you know, we talked about this last time, but, like, for the decision that you made for your family, that was what was right at that moment, and that's what you wanted to do,
Yeah.
and you know, persevered, like, you were proud of doing it and getting over it, and I don't think that, you know, another suggestion or another feeding route was in the cards for you, like, this was what you wanted to do, and you did it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it comes at a cost. I'm
Yeah,
not saying it's the right decision.
yeah,
You say you did it for your family. Like I did it for the baby. I also did it for me, but it was very hard on my family. And
yeah,
like I with my personality would do it again. I'd always do it. That's what I would do over
yeah,
and over again.
yeah, for your
But
kids.
on my family it wasn't easy.
Yeah,
And I have a stellar husband
yeah,
who, I count my lucky stars every day, who was there
support.
for me and who could, take on the toddler, um, and I'm very lucky for that because I don't think if I didn't have him, I would be able to do this. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
So how long did you because you're still breastfeeding your
Yeah.
second, how long did you breastfeed your first?
So I did 14 to 15 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I breastfed Maya for about 17 months, and I remember 'cause, like you said before, when you're breastfeeding, either you're bringing your baby with you everywhere or you're staying home, like, those are the only 2 options. COVID, I was lucky, I couldn't go anywhere anyway, so I was home. Um, but like you said, it's a one-man show, it's you and your baby, 17 months of breastfeeding. I
It's
remember
all on you. It's all
it's
you.
it was quite like it was a and I wouldn't change it for the world because of the connection and the bonding, but it's not a party, like, it was a lonely experience. I remember sitting in her room and, like, analyzing every crack in the ceiling because 'cause you're there for a long time. Sometimes I'm falling asleep, sometimes I'm reading a book, but it, and I'm grateful that it wasn't, like, a painful experience, but it's, it can get, very lonely.
Oh,
Um but I did it for 17 months, and I'm kind of proud of that because it wasn't easy, like,
no, no.
mentally, even if I
It's
didn't have, like, the scars and the not the scars, but
but you don't need those you
whatever.
don't need those war scars. Why do you need
Exactly.
them?
It was just mentally, I'm proud of what I did. What made you decide, like, "We're done"?
Wow, I gotta go back to there. I think that, what's so funny is that when I stopped, and I'm just gonna give some background to people here on how I kind of work, is that I always try to look at like um, the health recommendations and I try to take a common denominator. And I think at the time it was like CDC, WHO, and the AAP being the American Association
Yeah.
of Pediatrics. This was in
Who
2021.
recommend, by the way, to breastfeed until they're 2?
So I'm getting, this is my story.
Sorry.
At our time in 2021, when we had Maya in 2020
Yeah.
and my eldest in 2021, I think the recommendation there was still 12 months. And as soon as I rupture breastfeeding, so let's say 14 months later, as I'm stopping, I think I see within that month that they changed their recommendation.
To 2.
I mean, 2 is always advised that, so I think they would say like ideally 12 months, and
Yeah.
if you can go to 2.
Yeah.
And now they change it to like
Like 10.
ideally 2 months, 2 years.
If
Ideally 2 years.
That's
And I
old.
was like, "Oh, well, but there's I think again, they advise that, they recommend that because of all the benefits that
Yeah. Yeah.
comes with breastfeeding and
Yeah.
that are in the breast milk.
Yeah.
And so it being 12 months and I was back at work and she was at daycare, and I was introducing cow's milk.
Mhm.
All kind of lined up to just like stop
'Kay.
at that transition,
'Kay.
transitioning at 14 months.
Yeah.
Now, with my youngest, who's about to start daycare, I think actually my plan or what we're thinking is I might go further because um, she's starting daycare.
Mhm.
So we know that nursing
Yeah.
helps a lot with illnesses and antibodies.
All right.
So I might prolong it further to help her with all the
Okay.
illnesses
Okay.
that are going to hit her hard
Okay.
at daycare, right?
Okay.
So now we're going to go into like 3 months of her being sick every 2 days. Well,
Yeah.
breast milk helps with that,
All
right?
right. All right.
So it might just so happen that it'll go further, but I'm aiming for the same kind of like target of 14,
Yeah.
15. And thirdly, let's not forget, speaking of breastfeeding, I remember calling you and being like, I'm weaning, I'm stopping to breastfeed, and it's just like so emotionally
Mhm.
hard. There's
Mhm.
that emotional component.
Yeah.
And I remember it was so interesting. Like I was like, okay, you know what? She's 12 months or now she's 13 months. Like we should really start weaning her and like thinking about how to do it.
Yeah.
And I read about it and it's like, well, first you wean in the morning session. That's
Mhm.
like the easiest, but the hardest one
Mhm.
is the bedtime one at
Mhm.
night.
Mhm.
And I would just keep kicking the can down the road and being like, oh, I'm not ready.
One more day.
I'm the one who wasn't ready. It
Yeah.
wasn't her. And
Yeah.
then you build it up so much in your head
Mhm.
of like how baby's gonna struggle and baby needs this.
Mm.
And I remember just putting her
Yeah.
down. She's like, peace,
Yeah.
ciao, like
Yeah.
bye
Yeah.
mom, I'm going to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thinking that she needed it as a crutch or a sleep association.
Yeah.
And really it was just all on me the whole time.
So that's the thing with Maya is that at 17 months, I don't even think she was really drinking milk. Like I was just a pacifier for her.
It's a comfort.
And, but I didn't want to take that comfort away from her. I was scared, just like you, that she was going to cry and this and that. But I think that once she was able to sleep independently, and we'll talk about that on another podcast, but the weaning just kind of took its course. With Maddie being my second, poor girl, so always gets the short end of the stick. But I decided to wean her at 14 months because I wanted to go on a trip with my husband. And I was leaving the kids with the in-laws, and I didn't want to leave them with a breastfed baby because of all the
Association.
association issues and that. So I'm like, okay, Matt, I'm gonna wean Maddie off now. It's gonna take about a
Month.
week
Oh yeah.
or whatever,
A week, you're right, a week, 2 weeks.
But
like-
I felt so guilty because I felt that I was doing it for me. Like I felt selfish. I'm like, I'm gonna take her off the breast because I want to go on vacation. So I felt so selfish, and it was an inner struggle, and I was calling Matt, and Matt's just like, I mean, God bless him, but he's a man, and he was just like he doesn't breastfeed, so he doesn't understand the connection, But
The bond.
it's very it's scary, and like you said, I was sad because I think now in retrospect, it's your baby's growing, and that's one thing that they no longer need you for. So, your baby's born, they need you to survive. They depend on you for food.
You're their lifeline.
You're their lifeline. And then all of a sudden, they're able to do it on their own. And
their
that's just
food
the
chain.
first step of independence. And and now it gets a little bit easier, but it's like ripping off a Band-Aid, it hurts a little bit. It's hard. It's not an easy.
But what's good is you have both experiences.
Yeah.
You have the experience of 17 months and 12 months and
Yeah.
they got both benefits,
Yeah.
so.
But no, I don't. I didn't have tremendous struggles, and but like I said, it's work, and it's not. And I wish that we got more information in pregnancy about everything that could happen, so that we know what to look for at least, because
Sure, but going back to your gut, when something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I started with, I sensed it at the hospital. I sensed that something wasn't right.
Mhm.
And even though she was like taking way over the daily, required weight gain.
Mhm.
But you gotta trust your gut always,
Mhm.
always. Your gut is your compass. It
Yeah.
guides you.
Yeah.
Like you're the one who knows right from wrong, and you're the one who knows what your baby needs.
Yeah.
You talk about you don't need to have those war scars
No.
to breastfeeding. I saw this once with my first, and I just saw it again recently on social media with my second. Do you know how many hours, if you breastfeed for a
Oh,
year, you spend?
yeah. It's like more than a full-time job.
1,800. It's more than a
It's a
full-time job.
lot.
Talking about those aimless hours
Yeah.
in a room.
And then when you stop all of a sudden, people wonder why it's,
There's
like, so
there's a
hard.
huge void.
Yeah.
And it's that bonding experience, It's like I remember you telling me, having them in your arms and just that you moment. That's your precious moment, especially with a toddler in the mix. That's the moment I have,
Yeah.
with my baby, and
Yeah.
it's more like ripping off that Band-Aid for me.
Yeah, but I'll never forget them. I'll never forget breastfeeding,
No,
ever.
I'm gonna cry a ball this time
Stop, I'm gonna
because
cry
it's
now.
the end of the road for me. I'm gonna
You
cry
never
a
know,
ball. I'm
accidents
just gonna
happen.
keep kicking the can down there. I'm gonna breastfeed till they're 7,
Perfect.
like in Game of Thrones. No,
Oh my God. All right. Well, thank you very much, Catherine. I really appreciate you
my
sharing your
pleasure.
breastfeeding story with us.
it's my pleasure.
See you soon. You've been listening to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club. Follow First Moms Club on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Watch us on YouTube and Spotify, and listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Join us next week for more stories about this roller coaster we call motherhood. Thank you for listening.